Madam President, members of the Senate, if you look at the poster I just put up, you know what I'm going to talk about. The devastating floods here in Iowa and the Midwest. In western Iowa, we still have areas underwater from flooding on the Missouri River and its tributaries. In the east, we're dealing with the Mississippi River and tributary flooding. Unfortunately, the weather isn't cooperating with additional storms and rain throughout the upper Midwest as I speak that could exacerbate flooding and hinder cleanup and repairs. This flooding is still a very active event, but as we move to recovery, we know that the original damage estimates in Iowa are increasing. I could say that for Nebraska as well. Many roads are still closed. Levee damage is extensive. Towns are devastated, and many individuals lost their homes and businesses. In just 6 of our 99 counties in Iowa, 416,000 acres of cropland was flooded. Much of that cropland is still underwater. These farmers are facing the challenge of not being able to plant this year. Unfortunately, many of these farmers' fields were just recovering from previous years of major flooding. And in this area of Iowa, that would be 2011. This is compounded by many losing their previous harvests through having their on-the-farm storage bins destroyed, as you can see here. Throughout the Midwest area that had severe flooding, 832 on-farm storage bins have been identified as like these as destroyed. Maybe we don't have a complete estimate of that, but I think that 832 on-the-farm storage bins would be at least a figure up to a certain date. These bins hold an estimated 5 to 10 million bushels of corn or soybeans. So collectively, that would be a worth that we could say is lost between 17 million and $34 million. There's an existing program that goes by the acronym WHIP, W-H-I-P, that in the Department of Agriculture that's designed to address agricultural losses not covered by crop insurance and other programs. I reached out to the U.S. Department of Agriculture to see if this program could be used for losses like you see here, particularly in Iowa and Nebraska. That would be corn and soybeans. I was told because the WHIP program was designed for other commodities affected by hurricanes and wildfires, they needed a few words added to the law to extend the same help to these problems that we now have in the Midwest. I asked what those words were, and I spoke to Senator Shelby, who manages this bill on the floor of the Senate, and to Senator Perdue, that has a great deal of interest in the bill because of agricultural losses in Georgia. These two senators agreed to work with me, so I filed a short amendment to the disaster bill along with Senator Ernst and several of my colleagues from the Midwest to make sure that devastation like this is covered. I'm optimistic that this simple fix, which will mean so much to farmers facing such unusual catastrophic losses, can be included as the disaster bill moves forward through the United States Senate. Yesterday, as another way of helping more than just this type of farmers, but generally other disaster victims, I joined Senators Fisher, Ernst, and Sass in introducing a tax bill that goes by the title of the Disaster Tax Relief Act of 2019. This bill includes a series of disaster tax relief provisions that will help American families and businesses recover from the terrible disasters that have occurred so far in 2019, including the Midwest flooding. On February the 28th, I introduced a bipartisan bill with Senator Wyden that included the same tax relief provisions which would assist the victims of disasters that occurred in 2018. So I view the Fisher bill and the Grassley-Wyden bill as complementary, providing disaster tax relief with respect to the disasters that occurred last year as well as this year. The bill that I introduced in February also includes extensions of a series of tax provisions that almost every member of this United States Senate would like to see passed. These are the tax provisions that expired in 2017 and 2018. We label all 25 or 26 of these as tax extenders. These are things that over the last 2 decades have been extended almost automatically after they have sunset, and we need to get those provisions enacted, just like the disaster tax relief provisions. So I encourage the House Democrats to send the Senate a bill that addresses both tax extenders and disaster tax relief provisions. Now, when I say House Democrats, people listening are going to say, well, he's being partisan. No, I'm being constitutional. The Constitution says all tax bills have to start in the House of Representatives. The House of Representatives is controlled by the Democrat majority. So that's why I'm saying to the House Democrats, get these bills over here to us so we can help not only the people that benefit from what we call tax extenders, but more importantly, the urgency of the disaster that we're facing. Americans then, the importance of passing these bills is because Americans need certainty as they file their taxes in 2018, and they need the tax relief that they recover as they recover from these natural disasters. And they really need the House Democrats, under the Constitution, to pass a tax bill, because we can't act on these tax bills before. And the custom around here is, under the Constitution, since the Constitution says all tax bills have to start in the House of Representatives, if we passed even a simple tax bill, and let's say we passed it as part of an appropriation bill, we send it over to the House, they don't accept it. That's just tradition around here that's been for centuries. So that's why I'm calling on the House Democrats to move that. The disaster relief provisions included in the bill that we have introduced reduce penalties and make it easier to access retirement funds so individuals and families can get back up on their feet and rebuild their lives. In other words, these are retirement funds that people have set back, that the law doesn't allow them to access for disasters. Just a simple thing. If somebody that's hurt by this disaster wants to go to their retirement fund and borrow on it for a certain period of time to help them get relief, it's a pretty simple thing that maybe momentarily you could say costs the federal government something, but they're still going to owe these taxes regardless whenever they start drawing for retirement. These bills also make it easier for disaster victims to claim personal casualty losses, and they suspend certain limitations on charitable contributions to encourage more donations for this disaster relief. For businesses affected by these disasters, this tax relief is available to help them retain employees while businesses get back up and running. Let's continue the bipartisan tradition of helping our fellow Americans with disasters. When these disasters strike, we ought to do it by enacting this tax relief for both 2018 and 2019 so that disaster victims don't have to wait any longer to access this important assistance and continue and get back on their feet. And it may sound like I'm talking about something new, and I don't know whether this just started with Hurricane Katrina in 2005 or before, but I remember being chairman of the Finance Committee then. We passed similar legislation to help the victims of hurricanes. So really nothing new, and since it's nothing new and we've done it before, what's wrong with doing it now? And can the Democrats, House of Representatives, get this bill over to us so we can get it enacted over here and get it to the President? So we want to provide certainty that taxpayers deserve by enacting extensions of not only those disasters, but also by the expired tax provisions. I encourage the House Democrats to move swiftly, and the Senate and the American people are waiting. On another point of flooding generally, but not just dealing with this flood, but this flood brings to attention something that we got to deal with, the Army Corps of Engineers. So next week, the Environment and Public Works Committee is holding a field hearing in Southwest Iowa to provide oversight on the Army Corps of Engineers' management of the 2019 Missouri flooding, Missouri River flooding. Senator Ernst, my colleague from Iowa, will be chairing this hearing, and I'm going to be participating. Flood control should be the #1 priority of the Corps in the management of the Missouri River. And I hope tomorrow, when I get to travel with Vice President Pence, as he views the same area that I viewed 2 weeks ago, the same area covered here, I hope that we have Army Corps of Engineers there so that we can talk to them about the issue of the Missouri River Master Manual, authorizing 8 purposes as they control water up and down the Missouri River, and they do that through the dams that are on the Missouri River. It happens that 7 of these are cross purposes with the 8th one, flood control. And I hope flood control is #1, not #8. We need to discuss with them how to prevent massive flooding and act to ensure that folks in Nebraska, Iowa, Missouri, and Kansas are not faced with the devastation every few years. And eventually, you know, where this water ends up is in the Gulf of Mexico. And so states below Missouri are going to eventually be affected by it. I appreciate the stamina and determination of Iowans that I've seen out there, not only in this flood of 2019, but the flood of 2011, and the one of 2019 is much more devastating. I think we have great resiliency. We'll come back, we'll pull together to get the job done, but there is a very long recovery ahead of all these Iowans affected by it, Nebraskans, maybe to some extent Kansas, quite a bit in Missouri. I will continue to do everything that I can at the federal level to help the state of Iowa, Iowa communities, and more importantly, in fact, as individual Iowans are affected, I'm going to help them to recover and rebuild. Thank you, and I yield the floor and suggest the absence of a quorum.